Hi, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well and staying warm during this crazy snowfall that we've had. And hopefully, you're staying safe as much as you can during this time. So, because of that, we are having class online, and I just wanted to record this video kind of going over our lesson that we would naturally be seeing today in class. So, let me go ahead and share my screen so that we can go through it. Okay. So, biggest things that we're going to cover are persuasion, kind of do a final expectations and overview. I would naturally open it up for questions, but because we are online, I do plan to create a Zoom drop-in link. Again, we won't be going over specifically this during that Zoom, but if you want to drop in and touch base about any questions after you viewed this video, about what to expect, if there's anything I can clarify, if you just want to brainstorm, you just want an accountability partner to make sure that you're writing your speech, by all means, that time is for you, and I'm happy to provide that. So be on the lookout for that Zoom link as well to be able to join that. And then we'll also touch on just public speaking, a little bit about delivery, your style. If you're still trying to identify that, that is a-okay. But again, how do you want that to be portrayed? How do you want it to come across? What appeals are you using when it comes to persuasion, which we'll talk about. And then some different forms. So there's Monroe's motivated sequence, and we'll go over what that looks like here in a little bit. And then naturally, I give you some in-class work time, but again, happy to provide that Zoom, happy to chat, or just be an accountability person for you. But biggest thing is I did want to also mention that extra credit is due tonight, December 1st. It's been on our syllabus, so I will not take any late submissions as long as you email it over, regardless of which option you do, whether it's the putting together a video of kind of a trailer for your persuasive speech topic and what you're going to be discussing, or if it is the extra credit of doing the LinkedIn Learning that takes about an hour, hour and a half self-paced, where you also receive a certificate of completion that you could post on LinkedIn. So if you're interested in that and for some reason you can't find the link, please let me know. I'm happy to drop that to you. And then, as another reminder, our persuasive finals are coming up next Monday. So, again, use this time wisely. You can, either enjoy the snow or stay warm inside and start working on these speeches. And again, I'm happy to review anything, just let me know. So, jumping into it, what is persuasion? So, biggest things here, your objective with persuasive speaking is aimed at convincing an audience to adopt a particular viewpoint. Second, take a specific action. And third, to change someone's behaviors. So when I ask you, what are the objectives? What are the three objectives when it comes to persuasion? Those are your three there. So convincing an audience to adopt that viewpoint, take a specific action, or change that behavior. That is ultimately what you want to make sure as you're writing your persuasive speech. Am I doing one of these things? And if the answer is yes, then you're on the right path. If the answer is like kinda, sorta, not really, think about how you can restructure it in a way that best fits kind of aiming at one of these. And again, I'm happy to look over anything with you as well. But also, you know how we talked about ethos, pathos, and logos. So the audience's logic, their emotions is that pathos. What values speaks to them. That could also be in some form of that credibility. So take a look at some of those, but we'll go through those appeals again here either in a little bit or on Wednesday. But ultimately, you're trying to influence your audience through some type of communication there in your persuasive speaking. So, of course, I always say choose a topic from your area of interest or that you want to just know so much more about. If you feel like you can talk about it for hours on end, that's probably a good spot to be. So think about what that could look like. Is there anything, the first question I would ask you if you're trying to come up with persuasive speech topics is what boils your blood? What are you so passionate about? And you're like, I could die on this hill fighting for this. If that's something that speaks to you, great. And it doesn't have to take, a super, super serious tone if you don't want it to. I've had people say why you should apply to be on a reality TV show and then went into all the, aspects of that and found research that helps increase confidence, influence, just all around. So it doesn't necessarily have to say, why. I'm trying to think of a more serious topic. It doesn't have to take something that's too specific of why you need to recycle, for example. That's a great topic too, if that's something you're interested in. But again, if you want to have a little bit of fun with it, really just let your curiosity wander, go for it. This is your time to shine. And again, this is your final, which we'll look over what that percentage and kind of point value looks like in a little bit here. So there's no surprises there, but try and find that topic and find something that also has that factual data, maybe some examples. Can you share any testimonials? Because those two verbal sources are required, and I will be looking for those. So here's our persuasive techniques. Again, these are our persuasive appeals. So when I say what are our three persuasive objectives, that's again looking at those viewpoints, changing those behaviors, and getting someone to take a specific action there. So when we're talking persuasive appeals, though, this is our ethos, our pathos, and our logos, which we've discussed a little bit in the last couple weeks here. Remember kind of those examples that we saw with the Drake commercial, and then we saw the one with the cats, and there was another one with the OxyClean. So in that kind of perspective, how can you say, I'm going to use multiple techniques and appeals within those? Try it out, and if you're saying like, yeah, it kind of touches on it, what sentence can you take apart and restructure so that it does potentially go into one of these areas a little bit more? So take a look at that. Of course, there's pros to persuasions as much as there are cons, right? I'm sure you could probably think of plenty, but some of the pros to persuasion are informed decision making. So, again, are you clearly stating those facts, those arguments? How can you educate someone through a particular topic that they might not necessarily know and then take it that next further step? So, it's not just informing them, but you're taking it to that next step and enhancing it to say, okay, this is what we can do about it, though, right? So, you're giving them that enlightenment there. There's some motivation behind it. So, can you get someone to change their actions or behaviors? Is it something that you can have a long-lasting impact on, right? Maybe you're an accountability partner in that, whatever you're trying to persuade your audience to do. And then there's enhanced communication, of course. That's how you tailor your message to particular values or concerns. Now, if you were talking to a specific group that was, let's say, a sustainability group, you would know that probably a majority of those individuals that are showing up for that probably care about that cause in the first place to even show up, right? So, how would you tailor that kind of message further to them? What are their concerns? Have you heard their concerns? Maybe you've attended this, let's say it's a conference, multiple times and you've heard kind of these particular themes. You know that that feeds into what their concerns are and maybe what they value as an individual. So it can really enhance that communication, that easier connection with those audience members there. Now, influence and change. This is a big one because, again, how can you have people adopt those ideas, behaviors, policies? Are they going to make that change or are they going to be really hesitant to it? How long lasting is that change going to be because of your influence over those particular persuasive techniques, conversations, whatever it might be? And then conflict resolution, again, how can we mediate those disputes, find common ground, address the needs and concerns? Remember, that's a little bit touching into the reducing uncertainty. And again, how can we actively listen to address what's needed there? Can we clarify? Can we seek to understand, right? Kind of all those different aspects really, really feed into resolving that conflict. But of course, as there are pros to persuasion, there are cons. So this could be short-term impact, right? People can be persuaded to change in the moment, but revert back to those old behaviors or beliefs over time. Again, is it something that's a long-lasting change or that is just particular to that time because they were inspired or motivated or influenced to make change happen. But we're humans of nature, right? We go back to what we've always known or what our comfortable behaviors might be. So, in that, how can we make sure that this persuasion has a long-lasting impact? Again, for your speeches, think about what you want to talk about. How can you really let that performance theory shine? How can you work on those comments and feedback that you've received to this point? And what intentionality do you want to put behind it? Of course, you want everyone that's going to listen to your speech to probably change their actions or see your point of view or whatever it might be that your appeals are getting at. But in the moment, again, give yourself that credit, but how do you want that to be portrayed? Now, if this was something on a broader scale, maybe you're a public figure and that's what you do is public speak a part of your daily job. You would probably want that longer lasting impact beyond what you just had for an 8-week class of that influence, that change that you could bring amongst your peers. But think about that of how short of an impact it might have, again, on a bigger, broader scale. There can also be manipulation. Of course, the deceptive tactics, we've kind of talked about this in that social exchange theory a little bit. Maybe there's something to gain for one person, but it comes at a cost to someone else, right? Emotional exploitation. This can also be done in the form of pathos, that emotional appeal. Because if you are connecting with someone on an emotional level, that's one thing. But are you exploiting them? So are you doing something that is of a really deceptive kind of nature and you're taking advantage of them in that sense that, you think of something very, very tragic and if someone were to touch on that, would they be exploiting that situation that does have that emotional appeal? And then there can be misleading information, of course, right? If someone's not necessarily educated on the particular topic that you're speaking on, and individuals want to learn more, know more, and you come as that super confident subject matter expert, but you are, not backed by research. You're not backed by any credibility or factors of that nature, right? So you could be misleading individuals with the information that you're spreading. So that there's a manipulation risk overall going on in some cons to persuasion. There can also be ethical concerns that kind of piggybacks off of that. So the methods and potential consequences used, right? It might not necessarily come at a cost to you, but it might come at a cost to someone else. Resistance and backlash. It can lead to that resistance, distrust, negative reactions. So I always like to use the example of, someone might not actually be conning me out, but think about if you've walked through the mall and you've noticed anyone say, "Oh, like let me take care of your shoes, like I'll make them all nice," or there's kiosk individuals that are running you down and trying to sell you something. You're like, "No, I'm good. I'm good. Maybe I'm a little resistant, but have a nice day. See ya. Thank you so much." And let's say the situation gets more heated. They're not listening to you. They're still bugging you. It's just building up and building up to the point where it's almost getting like in your business, kind of in your personal space. There might be some backlash there. Hopefully nobody's ever dealt with that, but maybe there's some backlash to say, I've already said no, I'm good. That was kind of my boundary. Now I'm not really trusting you because you're really pushing that on me. And then the backlash can be that negative reactions. It could unfortunately get physical. Who knows, right? But there's that kind of boundary that's pushed and passed. So that can also be a con to persuasion. And again, I use that example in a very, very broad terms, but just to kind of paint a picture does not necessarily mean that that is the only case that would happen. But that's the example I use. Then there could be overemphasis on that emotional appeal. So again, deepening into that pathos. Is it something that could be superficial or biased in that decision making? Is there a personal motive that's going on behind kind of the scenes? So emotions can cloud our judgments and lead to that less informed decision making and almost a pressure of, I don't know if this necessarily feels right, but I'm just going forth and making the decision because I'm acting out of that emotion. So these are the cons to persuasion. I'm sure you can think of many, many more, and they are probably very applicable. And, what different cases can you think of with that? But of course, it's all a balance, right? So we try and use persuasion in a most ethical manner, thoughtfully, right? We don't want to intentionally, you know, be not great humans and con people out of, maybe money or something that wouldn't actually benefit them, right? You're doing something in a sense of, I want the best for whatever it might be with good intentions again. So the approach, again, if you're using persuasion in a sense that is a good kind of intentional factor, it can help build that trust, foster that constructive dialogue, again, continuous conversations, and achieve those meaningful results ultimately, which is what you want if you're trying to persuade someone. Ideally, you're probably not doing it to con them. So, that is persuasion kind of in a nutshell. Again, if you have questions, you want me to clarify anything, if you can think of examples and you want to share them, please send them through. I'm happy to hear and touch base on those. But now let's dive into what the final looks like for our persuasive speech. So, I don't like surprises. There will not be surprises, hopefully, in this. And again, if I can clarify anything, if you have questions, you want me to review, you want to do any mock trials with mock comments, I am happy to do so. Please, please use this time in the most effective manner that's going to work for you, but I'm here for you. Again, transparency all the way. But biggest thing, prepare. Seriously prepare. Yes, you've all written your speeches very, very well, but maybe there's been some comments or feedback that I've left on your papers to say, hey, practice verbally out loud a little bit more. So, my rule of thumb, practice, 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 practice. And when you think you've practiced enough, practice one or two more times, and then you've probably practiced enough. Apply that feedback. That feedback's there for a reason. Again, I'm very, very happy to touch base on any questions you might have, or hey, where should I spend my intentional time during, these short few weeks before our persuasive final. And I'm happy to do that with you and to let you know. But overall, ask those questions. Another thing, turn in your thought process either early or right on time, just so you don't lose easy, easy points. Again, my emails are there. You could send it to my AOL or my COD. I know a few people have been dropping it to my Gmail, which is okay, not a big deal. I try and check those if I know that thought processes are going to be coming in or are due, and then I forward those along to my COD email. But again, I go based off of the timestamp of when it is received. So even if you're like, well, I shared it with you, if I don't have it in my inbox, if I can't search it up and say it's there, then I don't have it. But again, let me know, try and seek to understand, reduce that uncertainty, and ask me, hey, I dropped over my thought process. Did you receive it? And I'm happy to respond yes or no, confirmed, not confirmed, and we'll go from there. But that is due on the first day of our speeches. Presentations. So 5 to 7 minute speeches. Again, anything under, and I give you that 10-second gap for over, will be that lost points as a result. But I'm still going to be time tracking, keeping that up for you. If there's something different you want to try this time, again, this is the spot to do it. You're in school for a reason to learn, try things out with, not necessarily harsh consequences. I would rather you be courageous and try something bold in class than, maybe 5, 10 years down the line if you had a corporate job and then you're, trying something random and you're in front of a lot of high stakes people. It might be a lot more nerve-wracking in those situations. So please be courageous, try different things out. If you want to touch base, again, happy to do so. But 5 to 7 minutes, again, we're still following that same rubric, just with higher point values this time, and I will show you what that looks like in a little bit. But biggest thing also, any speech read from your notes, more than 50% of your overall speech. This includes note cards, your slides, whatever you decide to bring up there. You will not receive more than half credit for that portion, and that's in that preparation and practice box at the top. But again, those point values are much higher this time, so the deduction would be much more. I'm looking for those two sources again in those speeches, and we'll go through here in a second of what that looks like again if you're looking for particular research engines to find that. And then I will also have a self-reflection for you when you're done. Just like always, there's a short 4 questions this time. And in the fourth question, I ask you, what have you liked about our class? What did you not like about our class? Is there anything I can change? Any ideas that you have? I'm here for that feedback. As much as I provide you feedback all semester long, I also take that feedback into account and say, how can I continue to adapt my course for future students and seeing what you guys like or don't like. So please, please let me know. Start thinking about that now. If you don't want to write down a huge paragraph, that's fine. If you want to just touch base with me and tell me, please, I'm open and I'm all ears. I want to hear the good, the bad, the ugly, different creative aspects that could be accounted for, how you like to learn, and it would be nice to see that kind of adaptation in the future. I'm more than open to that. So I appreciate it and thank you for it in advance, but let me know. So, how do I do that research again? These are the 3 kind of systems that I really enjoy. Again, there might be something that you prefer more. That's okay. So again, we have our COD library homepage, Google Scholar, and EBSCO or EBSCO host here. And again, they work relatively the same. I'm not going to go too in depth of them today, but if you wanted to jump on that Zoom and you said, hey, I'm struggling to find sources for my topic X, Y, and Z, can you help me? Happy to do so. We'll scroll together, we'll look through it. Again, if you run into any access issues, because it says, sign in with your library page for Google Scholar, for example, and it says, oh, well, you need to actually pay $35 for this article. Stop right there, send me an email, drop me the link, and say, I'm really interested in this, but I can't get around, paying that money. Is there a way that you can help me? The answer is yes. I have many logins to many things. We can figure it out together and we'll go from there. But ultimately, do not let that be a hurdle for you. I'm here to help. We'll get around it together and go from there. Okay? So, finding those sources, but if you get stuck, happy to look with you, for you, drop you some things and say, hey, what sticks out? What do you like? What do you not like? But do not let that be an area that you suffer in or becomes a hurdle. So, next things here. So, what are we changing from the informative speech to that persuasive speech? So, again, the objective in your informative speech was to educate your audience on a particular topic. Now, for your persuasive speech, it is no longer just to educate your audience. You have to take it that further step to now convince them to take action, influence them to do something, change their behaviors, or adopt that particular viewpoint. So, again, those 3 objectives is adopt a particular viewpoint, take an action on something, or change their behavior for whoever your audience might be. Crafting a strong statement and a strong message there. Make sure that it's clear and concise, that your statement encapsulates kind of that persuasive argument. So if we're using for the example of multimedia devices are essential for communication in today's digital world, and we must embrace the use of enhancing this with our interactions. Great, I've taken a stance on that. You know what I'm going to try and convince you of roughly, but maybe I'm going to now go into saying, okay, here are the behaviors in which we need to start embracing them. Is it that we integrate it into our everyday lives through a project management system and move away from kind of paper calendars? Could be. Or, are you going to adopt this viewpoint and I'm going to convince you on why? So, why we need multimedia devices. Again, using this topic as a very broad idea, you do not have to use this, you do not have to find something similar, but it builds onto what we're going to be discussing on Wednesday, which is one of my favorite chapters. So just putting that there. But also, again, those emotional appeals, your ethos, your pathos, your logos. So what's your credibility in talking about this? Are you going to share maybe a personal story? Again, whatever you would like to do. I also will say that if you're going to talk about something that can be a little bit triggering, let's definitely touch base. Again, use your best judgment with that, but I want to make sure that you're supported through this process, one, for yourself, and two, as you're speaking of this that you might be more comfortable in, others might not necessarily. So happy to be a source and touch point for you, but use your best judgment wisely. So that ethos is that credibility, pathos is that emotional appeal there, and logos is that logic, facts, data, evidence. So again, maybe integrating a relevant story, facts, that evidence, data, and so on from there. And then also, I think it's really important to address those counter arguments. I'm not going to be particularly looking for that in the grading rubric itself, but it's important to acknowledge that other people might see otherwise if it's not necessarily a strong, one-sided conversation. If there's something that could be debated of, well, I see it differently because X, Y, and Z, maybe it's worth talking to someone that doesn't necessarily see eye to eye with you on either this topic or many things in life and just hear what they have to say. What are the counter arguments that they bring up? And just instead of taking that approach to say, well, you're wrong, or this is how I see it, or all of that, use that moment to really actively listen. Can you clarify what they're saying? Can you seek to understand? Can you re-emphasize in different words what they're saying and if that's aligned? Because maybe then you use that as a counter argument of, well, here I go. I interviewed my, parent, for example, and they had to say this, which I didn't necessarily see eye to eye on, but in hearing their approach to it, X, Y, and Z, right? So addressing those counter arguments, because again, not everybody sees eye to eye, and especially if you're coming with such great persuasive techniques, appeals, all of the frameworks that you're hitting, but you may not address that counter argument. There's that missing kind of piece. So if you can add that, please, please do. But ultimately, feel out what your speech and your speech topic kind of alludes to. And if you want me to review, give you any comments, feedback, you have questions about that, let's touch base. So an example transition from an informative speech to a persuasive speech is I could say in an informative speech, online learning platforms offer flexibility and access to a wide range of courses, right? I'm not necessarily taking a standpoint. So I can say that it does because maybe I bring up Coursera as a flexibility offered to a wide range of different courses. I could also say like LinkedIn Learning as an example there. So I can really dive deeper into these, and it's not necessarily that I'm trying to persuade you to take that action or change your behaviors or adopt that viewpoint, because there is a lot of factual evidence kind of behind that. But if I wanted to make it a strong, persuasive speech topic, I could say we must prioritize online learning platforms as essential tools for education, right? I'm kind of taking a stance there. We have to prioritize this. We need to maybe take action now or change our behaviors, right? Or maybe you're going to adopt that same viewpoint because I'm going to go into it. And then I further say, by embracing these flexible resources, we can expand our knowledge, develop new skills, and adapt to the ever-evolving job market. So maybe that's kind of where I'm going to go in my speech, right? So expanding our knowledge, there's a wide breadth of access now that we probably didn't have 20 years ago. Develop new skills. If you want to learn something, I mean, YouTube is the first spot I typically go, right? So, in developing particular skills, maybe we learn by watching others. Maybe that's how we prefer to learn and adapt to the evolving job market. I'm sure all of you have thought about the job market and what you want as a future career at some point in life. So, how do you stay most ample to that kind of change and what that looks like, what the market calls for? And I mean, you're here already taking account for your education, so that's something already in that sense. So maybe I close out my introduction there by saying, let's commit to making lifelong learning accessible to everyone, right? Maybe I dive deeper into that sentence in my in my performance theory there. And I really let that land. It's taking that serious tone that I want to make sure that we have that united front and that banding together to really make that journey accessible and provide those options to a wide breadth of individuals that want to show up and learn different things and work for it, right? So just something to take a look at, but again, think about your comments, feedback, how you want to structure it. I know there's so much here, but I'm happy to look over anything again. I will continue to emphasize that. So if you want more of a rough outline, again, this is kind of my thought process and idea sharing here. You do not necessarily have to follow this structure. If there's something that works particular for your topic or how you want to write it, go for it. But some of the things that I would be looking for here are a clear purpose. So, again, be mindful and respectful of all identities that you are around. If you want to talk about something that might be triggering for someone else, please, by all means, let's touch base. If it's something of the fact of like mental health, please put, the resource of 988 as something for audience members to psychologically check their own safety and how they're doing. But when in doubt, please gut check with me. I will reemphasize that again. I'm here to even just view it or touch base. There's no judgment. I won't necessarily deter you away. There's a way to say everything that you want to say, but it might have to be structured in a way that is safe for your audience members and respectful of their identities as well. So happy to touch base on that, but your introduction and what kind of your credibility is there. So you don't necessarily have to say your name, your major, and then transition into that kind of credibility and trustworthiness, right? This is your third speech. We probably know your name by now, if not everybody. But in that, maybe you're going to establish that you're talking about entrepreneurship, and maybe that's the major that you're going into. So how can you elude what your introduction is with taking a stance, figuring kind of the rough outline of what you're going to be speaking on so that you can adapt that kind of credibility, that trustworthiness there, a little bit of that ethos. Maybe you touch on some pathos, maybe you've got some of that performance theory in there. Again, there's not necessarily one right way to structure it, but feel what feels best to you in writing that topic. And then, of course, using appeals. So, at least one, right? You're probably going to touch on it without even necessarily knowing it, but it's always best to try and use a mixture if you can, if not all of them. The more you use, the stronger that persuasive speech will be. But again, some might be a little bit harder than others. But happy to look over anything or suggest any edits. But you could also tell stories in there, use vivid language. So, can you paint us pictures? Maybe you're asking questions to the audience, or you're addressing kind of their hopes and fears. How can you connect with them? Is there something that you might have a particular value or moral that other people might also naturally speak to? So, a strong argument, again, what stance are you taking? Is it backed and supported by evidence, facts, statistic? What is kind of the backing and reasoning that there is so much passion to the topic that you're reviewing? Continuing on here, so effective delivery. I will emphasize again, I know there's a lot of different things I'm emphasizing, but your delivery, what's your tone? What's your body language saying? How do you want that to be engaged? Is it clear and confidently effective and delivered? Again, trust yourself. You've done what, two speeches at this point? Three speeches, technically, including your introduction. But really lean into that. What does it look like? How do you want to say mic drop at the end of this? This is your final marking. Yes, it's your final, but don't think about it in that sense. Think about it in the sense of how much growth you've had over these last few weeks. And honestly, I'm very proud that you've taken the scary step. Some of you said, I like public speaking, but a lot have said, no, it's not my thing, or I'm kind of iffy about it or indifferent. I don't really know. But that's okay. Would you say the same thing that you said on the first day? Some of you might be like, yeah, definitely. But I have to say, I'm very proud that you just took the courageous effort, regardless if this is just a credit that you have to take. I mean, you put in the time, that reflects in your grade itself, and be proud of that. I think that's something to celebrate and enjoy because it is not easy fitting in speeches in 8 weeks, and I know you can imagine for yourself that, you're not the same person you were even 8 weeks ago. Give yourself that credit. Again, those counter arguments, how are you addressing them? Different potential objectives, maybe counter arguments, values, perspectives. What does that look like? Maybe consider that and addressing that into your argument to enhance it further. And then just kind of a closing final statement or words. Again, how are you going to leave that mic drop at the end that really says, yeah, I did this and I did this very well. That's what I'm looking for. Give it your all, leave it your all. Don't think too much about, oh my gosh, this is my final. It's worth so many points, which we'll review here. But give yourself that. You've got this. I know you've got this. Let it all hang, and you are gonna do great. So, of course, here is where I would ask you a question if we were in person. But if you have any recommendations that you want to share, either to myself or to others when we get back, please let us know and let myself know because I'm always looking to continuously recommend, hey, have you practiced this type of way? Or here's a tactic to consider if you're struggling with like nonverbals or filler words or whatever it might be. How do you want that to kind of land? So if there's anything that works for you, that I haven't necessarily addressed, please let me know because I am here to learn from you as well. So, all summarized up, what's your clear purpose there? Again, you're trying to change opinions, motivate some action, or have your audience take that particular stance. Please, again, be mindful and respectful of all identities. If you want to do that gut check, I'm here for it. Your introduction, what's that credibility, other appeals that you're using, strong arguments, are you framing them in a sense that it flows naturally? And as you're practicing verbally, I will say if you tend to notice yourself tripping over one sentence, just mark it. Mark it the few times that you're practicing. Does it become easier, or is it still just kind of that pain point that you struggle with? If that's the case, then maybe you look at the sentence structure of it, or do you delete it? Do you need it because of the timing, or is it something that you just don't necessarily have to deal with and you can almost completely cross out if it doesn't flow naturally or it's giving you kind of that hurdle to face in those moments? Figure that out for yourself, but again, happy to talk through anything if you're like, hey, it feels a little choppy here, want to know different ways to go about it. Maybe it's rephrasing it, and we'll look over that. Effective delivery, again, practicing out loud. Take the time. What is your tone saying? How is that body language interpreted? How can you further engage? It can all impact your effectiveness there. What is that performance theory, and how do you want that to come across? Is there a time that you want to use the space differently, or maybe that you bring up props or something, whatever you want. Again, this is your time to shine. Do what fits best. But I'm looking for that confidence. Give yourself that credit at this point. Take that time to make the clear delivery for your message. Any counter arguments addressing that, so maybe what their objective is, how they see those viewpoints is really, really important. And then a closeout, final statements, kind of your mic drop moment. What do you want to say at the end there? So, recapping of everything, again, these are kind of the sections of boxes that I will be looking for. So, preparation, again, practice, practice, practice. And when you think you've practiced enough, what are you going to do? Practice again. Exactly. It's so much more fun saying that in person, but I will see you all on Wednesday, and I can't wait to see you and hear about all the great things that you're thinking about for your persuasive speech. But happy to receive those thought processes early or in advance. If you're like, hey, that was something I struggled with the last two speeches, I just want to make sure I get this in, even if it's a work in progress. I'm happy to see that it's in progress and that you're getting at it, but please send those over whenever you can. And then your presentation, again, hitting that 5 to 7 minutes is going to be the most important factor in kind of that box itself. Test yourself with the timing as you're practicing verbally out loud. I'll help you keep track of that time, but again, you're more than welcome to bring a timer with you. We will be going with my time in the back as that's the official time. So even if you start it and then you're getting your notes all together and then you start speaking, I start the timer when you start speaking there. So any speech read from your notes, again, 50% deduction there, and you won't receive more than half credit for that box. But at this point, I think all of you have either known that that's not a point that you struggle with or that we've already addressed it prior. And then effectively integrate those two sources. Again, reference suggested for myself are the COD Library homepage, Google Scholar, EBSCO, EBSCO host, whatever works best for you, but that's usually my kind of starting point. And then there will be that self-reflection. If it turned in before the end of our classes on December 10th, then it is a completion grade. And please let me know again any suggestions, edits to the class, any things that you liked, disliked, new fresh ideas. I'm here for it. Please definitely let me know. And then again, optional visuals and slides, completely optional. I will say if you are going to bring in any type of food item that could have allergies, not a big deal. Please just let me know what that is so that I can make others aware of that. And no live animals. Again, I always have to say that, but please keep your furry friends and reptiles at the house, but you can bring in a picture, of course. All grading rubrics, again, are that same similar structure, but the point values are much higher. If you want to review that, I do have in-person copies with me typically, and I'm happy to show you that or send you a photocopy of it. But I want to touch base on this little box that you see down here that is a screenshot from the syllabus itself. So your outline, your thought process itself is 30 points out of your 130 for the final. So please, 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 I cannot emphasize that again. Turn in your thought process in time or early if you just want to get it out of the way because that's 30 points in itself. Your actual presentation of your speech performed in front of the class is 100 points out of that 130 points. So this accounts for that 5 to 7 minutes, the 2 sources required, and the actual presentation and preparation box at the very top. In that, I will say, if you're wondering, how many deductions would, you know, filler words be, I'm happy to run a mock trial, mock draft with you and grade you as if I was actually grading you for the final, just so you have a baseline and know what that you have to work on in the short time that we have before our final. Again, I don't believe in surprises. I don't want you to be surprised. So if you are happy to take the 5, 10 minutes to do so, same with me. And then that personal reflection for that persuasive speech, again, that's that self-reflection sheet. That is 10 points as long as it's turned in before the end of class on December 10th. And then participation and attendance. This is accounted for through the whole semester. That is worth 25 points. So as long as you've spoken to me about, hey, this is what's going on in life and this is why I've missed, that shouldn't be too big of an issue. But if you haven't physically attended class or you've been pretty delinquent on that or you don't participate, again, no surprises. This has been in the syllabus, but I do want to let you know that that is coming up and that will be entered on the last week of class. So show up ready, and let's finish strong together. So naturally, I would open up for questions here, but please either email me, drop onto the Zoom so that we can speak, touch base, just chat if you want an accountability partner for that time and you just want to be online to work. Happy to do so, or you just want a friendly face and spend some time that we would naturally spend together in person. I'm happy to do that as well, and I hope everyone is doing okay and had a relaxing break here. So, with that, I'm probably going to hold off on this public speaking continued here. Yeah, I'm going to hold off on these as well as Monroe's motivated sequence. We'll touch on that on Wednesday and then touch base on how we're doing for our speeches because I don't want this video to be too long. I know it can be kind of dragging here. But to give us a heads up again of what to expect, recapping. So on Wednesday, on December 3rd, we will touch on Monroe's motivated sequence, continuing to adapt to persuasive techniques and tactics of how you want to present your speech. And then we'll go into one of my favorite chapters. I say that all the time, but truly we'll talk about multimedia effects on public speaking. So we'll go into deep fakes, what can help or hurt credibility, and further those sources and what that looks like for the future and how the future of communication can be altered altogether. So bring your thoughts, ideas. I'm here to discuss. And again, if you're struggling about, oh, where do I stand with, class attendance or participation, I'm happy to touch base on that as well. Again, I will emphasize this forever that please, please reduce that uncertainty for yourself and just ask. And even if you don't know how to phrase it, say that and we'll figure it out together. But we'll also have our Kahoot Quiz 5, and that will be our final one for the semester. So after December 3rd, if you haven't touched base with me because you're going to miss all of the final quizzes before, if I have not already spoken to you about a later date, then December 3rd will be the closeout completely for all of the quizzes. There will be no laid up section of exceptions for that. And then I'll leave us some work time. So again, if you want any mock trials, mock drafts, any comments, feedback of what that sounds like, looks like for your persuasive speech performance, you want me to touch base on anything, let's do that. I have the time for it. We'll make the time for it, and we'll continue to talk about that. December 8th and 10th, again, those are our persuasive speeches. There will be no makeups after that. If you have an outstanding speech, if I have not already sent you an email, which I believe I have to everybody that is missing a speech up until this point, please, please touch base with me because the deadline to communicate what you are deciding is at the end of tomorrow, December 1st. So let me know so we can get that all assessed. And then a reminder of extra credit is due by the end of tonight. It is in our syllabus. There are two options of creating a trailer video or that LinkedIn Learning, but let me know if you can't find that, and then that is it. So I hope everyone had a fantastic break, safe break. You're taking care of yourselves and doing what you need. We'll touch on these few little things that we didn't address today on Wednesday, but I hope everyone is doing well, and I'll see you on Wednesday. Have a great one.